Hi, I'm Mike Sibley, leader of the James Moore manufacturing team. I'm here with Kevin Golden, one of my partners, and also a member of the James Moore manufacturing team. We are excited to welcome Allen Proithis to the show. Sorry, Alan, I know I'm
That's all
messing
right.
that
You
up.
got it. You got it.
Hey, I'm close. Alan is the CEO of Capstone Partners, a strategic advisory firm for clients in the smart manufacturing, mobile, IoT, and software industries. Capstone provides strategic advisory, ecosystem development, and market insights to help early stage publicly traded companies accelerate time to market and revenue growth. So, which is the perfect background. One of the things that is happening in a discussion in manufacturing is smart manufacturing, industry 4.0, manufacturers and technology coming together. And it's a really important topic. It's an important evolution for manufacturers to start thinking maybe more like a tech company, which Alan's going to help us talk about a little bit more. Coincidentally, talking about timing, and we're not going to get into this today, but there's this really big tax bill that everybody heard about. We've done another recording on more on manufacturing that actually has a lot of help with dealing with increasing technology investment and how you're going to recover that over time. But that's a topic for another day. But this is actually building off of some opportunities there. So, Alan, welcome to the show. Appreciate having you on.
Well, thanks for having me, and I'm excited to get into it because I think we're at just the beginning of the biggest boom in American manufacturing probably since World War II.
Wow. Yeah. Well, let's get right to it then, Alan. I mean, so, manufacturing, most people, they know that trade very, very well. And of course, there's technology all over the place in use, but this is on a whole totally different accelerator path, and so where you're, I guess, challenging traditional manufacturing to think more like tech companies. What do you actually mean? Give me kind of like the roadmap or high level. What do you actually mean by that beyond maybe what manufacturers today traditionally have used technology in their operations and on their warehouse floors?
Well, let's go back to the granddaddy of them all, right? Ford and building the Model T, right? And there was an announcement this week about how Ford is spending $2 billion to reconfigure from the original concept of you sort of have one big line where people do specialized stuff, and eventually you get a car out of it, which is still the way they build cars today in most cases. And they announced they're spending about $2 billion to really do this tree type of thing where it sort of is modularized as you go in different pieces of the manufacturing process. And if you think about tech, tech isn't monolithic. Everything is built modularly, whether it's hardware or software or processes. And so it's a great example where we're not even talking about AI here, although I'm sure, that's something we should talk about. We're just simply talking about how do you think about your manufacturing process from beginning to end? And how do you innovate to be more efficient, more flexible? And if you think about what tech allows you to do, I have some really smart friends that are small business owners, doctors, lawyers, all that kind of stuff. But because they're not immersed in tech and don't know where to go for lunch in Silicon Valley, this tech stuff seems like magic half the time. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that even with the AI stuff going on, it's really impressive, but it's not magic. It's just a tool. And when you start thinking of it as a tool to be applied like you would any other tool, I think it becomes much easier to sort of evaluate it and decide how to apply it to a traditional manufacturing business.
Nice.
I think, and ultimately, what's really driving it. There's a lot of different reasons why. Being able to make decisions faster, dealing with labor shortages. So, I mean, when you're, from your perspective, what do you see really driving the need of a manufacturer? In other words, they almost have no choice. They can go kicking and screaming. They can delay it, but what's driving that need to have to do this?
Well, the other choice is to die, right?
There you go.
I mean, well, it's. I hate to say it, but that's the other choice, and some people don't pick it, proactively, but they tend to inherit that choice because, as I always remind people, not making a choice is a choice as well. And you think about what are the sort of the big secular economic drivers, and even before we had the tariffs go in. You're talking about things like a secular demographic decline, okay? Of how do you get workers in manufacturing environments? And that's why I really enjoy all the micro dirty job stuff too. And not every in
I
fact,
love
very
those.
few manufacturing jobs are dirty anymore.
Mhm.
But you know, you can make such incredible money in manufacturing and the trades for someone coming out of school. I have two nephews who I've encouraged go become electricians.
Right.
Instead of going to school, very smart kids, but I just can't imagine doing that. Sit in an office all day stuff. And so my point is that when you talk to people, and I was with the CIO, I had lunch earlier this week, the CIO of a close to $1 billion company in the steel and industrial. They actually build manufacturing plants for people, and they can't even find people to do inventory of what's in the yard to build stuff. So I think just the amount of humans available, and then trying to recruit them for these jobs, even though they're great jobs, is more difficult as time goes on, and the trend's going to get worse. On top of that, you throw down lower immigration, both legal and illegal, and you have a real people shortage, and that'll drive some other trends we can talk about robotics. But I think the other thing that I alluded to was even before the current administration, there was a trend towards getting manufacturing back in the region of consumption. So we've started this trend of a massive build in more manufacturing in region before the tariffs, and with the tariffs, I know lots of people now getting phone calls of, "Hey, I need to at least move part of my capability back in the U.S.
Right.
How do I do that, and where are those people coming from?" So I think there's some really big secular trends. And the final thing I throw out is that the collection of new technologies, whether it's AI, robotics, semi-autonomous type of stuff, it drives such efficiencies when it's used correctly that if you don't embrace them, you become the least competitive supplier in your industry. And you become it very quickly. Not only competitive from a cost and price standpoint, but less competitive from a flexibility and from an innovation standpoint. So again, you don't have to embrace these new things. It's not easy to embrace these things. But if you don't, you probably are going to die.
Well,
Yeah,
and
I think that's a. Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
I was gonna say one point I kind of like, Alan, that you mentioned is we can't, when you said we can't get people to do inventory, we can't get people to do that. I just got back actually this afternoon from a tour of a glass plant, right? Glass manufacturer that a lot of it was stuff they didn't want to do because it's hazardous, because it's heavy. I mean, glass is heavy, right? So there's some of these jobs that those robotics in there were doing that now not only is it more precision and more accurate and things like that, resulting in a better product, less waste, things like that. It's also one that a lot of workers didn't want to do because of the strain, the stress, and things on their body and all that it was placing. So I think, and then that goes into the whole safety protocol, less accidents, things like that. But I think just thinking about it, a lot of times when we think of these type of robotics, and also sometimes as well, are replace a job, or even better, replace jobs that nobody wants to do anyways, or hazardous in that case to them. So again, I think there's definitely needs for that all around, not just the pure workforce, but that's definitely one as well.
Well, Kevin, it's funny you say that there's a company that's now raised over $100 million in the last couple of years that originally was a robotics company that was made for flipping hamburgers. Okay, because they couldn't get kids, to show up or work in these restaurants.
Right.
And they realized that the hardest job was not that. The hardest job in the restaurant, fast food restaurant, is actually working the fries. Nobody wanted to work the deep fat fryer. And even when they
Right.
were working it, oh, they get texted the girlfriend. Oh, they get distracted with, oh, I think I'll get a soda. And oh, the ice cream machine broke. And so you didn't get quality, consistent product out either. And so the
Right.
company shifted to actually just adding on to an existing fry area and just totally automate the fry process, whether it's onion rings, French fries, chicken nuggets, whatever it is. And they can't make them fast enough for that very reason, that it's not just the demographic problem. It's just that it's the least desirable job. And it's the job that gets the highest turnover when you put the person on the fry area.
Right.
But it's funny. I was actually just having the same exact conversation about what's driving manufacturing and changes, and things like that. And I think your point is dead on that if you're not changing, if you're not evolving, you're dying,
Right.
Mhm.
and because the competitors are. But when it comes to labor, there's still this picture of, I think, it's great that you are encouraging family members to go look at, the trades or something different. There's still this picture of manufacturing from, the industrial ages of 1875 or something like that. That's not, there's manufacturing that's, yes, warm, lacks air conditioning. Manufacturing looks very different nowadays. It's very technical. There's a lot of clean room areas, it's not what it was. And I'm not sure a lot of people realize just how technically advanced manufacturing is. And we're not even partway through this next revolution here.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny. I grew up in Eastern Pennsylvania, not too far away from the original 15 miles of Bethlehem steel plants along the river and canal there. And, you still remember all the metal shooting out from the old pictures. But you're right. You go in factories today, like the people that acquired my last company. And again, we were doing private 5G networks to enable all this technology and manufacturing environments. They're in 17,000 industrial and logistics sites. And the number one request they get is, how can you help us automate everything in these environments faster, which is why they needed our technology. And so it's completely different from this image of years past. It's really, and in fact, there's another interesting stat that came out in the past week. Amazon warehouses now have approached the 50-50 point of robots and people.
Amazing.
And
absolutely amazing.
So how are you going to compete with that if you don't have some level of automation?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's dig in a little bit further. So, when you think about it, everybody's dealing with, or changing, everything's more digital, and we're seeing that. But for manufacturers going through a digital transformation and digital technologies and adopting those, what are you seeing? And what are examples of what does that look like? How do we help them understand what a digital transformation looks like?
So I think it starts with, again, for classical readers of management theory, Peter Drucker, okay? And he always said you can't manage what you can't measure. And the thing about technology, it allows you to measure everything. And so I think the biggest mistake people make is they read Forbes, they see something online. Hey, I need 10 more pens of that AI stuff. Can you get that done tomorrow for me? And so they're doing it backwards, doing it from, I saw this cool technology. How can we figure out where to stuff it in somewhere and see what happens? It typically fails. What really works better is when you have a problem, and it's a problem that's important to your business. And traditionally, you couldn't really solve it. And with the application of the right technology at the right time and the right amounts, you can actually solve that problem, and it really changes your business. And it could be something as simple as, doing things like, how do you connect everything up? It's amazing. One of the projects my last company did was providing campus connectivity in the largest shingle manufacturing operation in the U.S. Okay, and there's lots of inventory outside. There's lots of metal equipment, metal everywhere. And with older technologies, you can't even connect everything up. So you can't do inventory. You don't even know where your forklifts are or other equipment that moves around or are at any point in time. So you may start with some of that basic stuff of, how do we get this secure connectivity umbrella everywhere? And then start with this low-hanging fruit that adds a lot of value. And then once you get that on, you can say, hey, we're going to start connecting up more and more machines in the manufacturing process. Maybe we want to track workers for safety and just control in the campus. We don't want to walk out of the building, have to do a VPN on a cellular network, and then walk in the next building and then try to jump back on a private network, because that's probably the biggest vulnerability in all our infrastructure. And so we're gonna solve that right now. So we need to do other stuff. So that's the way I think about it: is start with the problem that you have, and then start in one place, learn and scale. I guarantee you, however you start, however I start, it's not going to be 100% right. You learn by doing, and then you can scale it. And that's really the proven formula for success.
Yeah, I think that's, when I definitely agree with all that. And I think as I think about it, it's getting information to you as fast as you can handle it,
Right.
and in a way that you can do something with it, as something that's in an absorbable way. And I think, like you're talking about, understanding your inventory levels is a very basic but high value thing. And Kevin and I, we work with a lot of manufacturers that are growing fast, and they haven't gotten the systems in place. And oftentimes they have more inventory than they need, or they may not have enough inventory and realize, oh shoot, we're not going to make this deadline because we didn't have the systems in place to properly track that and feed that into our models.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
suggest a lot of those guys don't even know what their inventory turn is accurately half the time.
Right. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a lack of visibility is all it is. And
Mhm.
those things helping you do that.
Yeah.
You mentioned Alan, with your VPN example and then private network example of that being a threat. I mean, so we have an IT team. A lot of people have an IT team or their IT provider or whatnot, and that's what they're all talking about is cybersecurity. I mean, you read about it, everything from the news to dealing with it, at a very, in some cases, very real level. At your organization, right? In some way, shape, or form. We have trainings all about it and things like that. So that's always top of mind, and that's an ever-present threat, right? So how does that, okay, we're now, if we're manufacturing, we're thinking more like a tech company. We're trying to, integrate and have all these items. How do we then manage, maybe the cybersecurity with that? How do we even tackle that? Because now I would assume more digitization, more technology, more opportunity there for potential threats from that cybersecurity realm.
Yeah, I mean, the more IT you put in OT, you get a lot of benefits, but you
Right.
also have to be cognizant of the risks. And so, any company of any size has had to invest a lot in security. I can tell you, what typically happens is you have a great technology, you talk to the GM or the plant manager, some of the other people that are the product owners, they test it out, they absolutely love it. And then you get an email, they go, let's go forward. And then you get an email a couple of days later. Alan, I forgot. Can you talk to my IT security guy? And then 6 months later, you're still wondering what boxes you got to check. And they're frustrated, everybody's frustrated. So it's a really important thing to check off. But this is where the gap between IT and OT can slow you down a lot of times because the IT guys are sort of used to one kind of infrastructure and the OT guys are used to a different. And there's no question you need to have a robust security, but the boxes, the way they think about IT is often a little bit different than the way you have to guarantee security on OT. And so typically when you get started on this journey or you're still in the early phase, you have to get some outside help from someone that can, like, for instance, beyond SOC 2 compliance, have you really do a lot of testing on your network? Have you really thought about not just the solution you're implementing, but how this fits in your overall security framework? And I think that's the trick, is not to think about this as a one-off, but think about it as part of an umbrella of thinking with cybersecurity. Because guess what? The problem's going to become bigger every month because you're going to have to constantly do more with digitalization. And so you might as well have an idea where you're going so you know how to plug everything in. Because if you do it onesie twosie, you're going to have gaps.
Well, what's really funny, and I talk about this all the time with our manufacturing clients, because the equipment now is connected to the internet. Oftentimes, you can take drawings and you can import them into a CNC machine, right?
Sure.
And if it's connected to the internet now, how are you dealing with the security of this? So you get some
They're not.
brilliant,
They didn't ask.
evil hacker, right, who comes in and shuts down your CNC machine or steals your drawings or something like that. And so companies have been in sort of a digital age, maybe not as sophisticated as some of the things that they can evolve to, but that risk is there now with these machines that might be connected that they don't even realize they've got connected in a way that's attackable.
Well, it's really crazy. I mean, there's a famous story from a few years ago where one of the big casinos in Las Vegas paid to have this really big special aquarium put in. And to maintain it, the supplier had to have it connected through and had Wi-Fi on it. Well, some foreign hackers got access to the rest of the casino through that one Wi-Fi aquarium connection. So these things happen all the time, and that's why you need to think about it in terms of your overall framework approach. versus a onesie twosie, or you can get in some real trouble. But fortunately, I mean, cybersecurity has really stepped up. It's sort of like think about the early days of cars. Nobody knew what a seatbelt was. People forget until the late '60s. I mean, before my time, but there wasn't even a safety glass. And if you had an accident, the hood would come back and just come right across to everybody in the car. And then they
Right.
thought, oh, we should have safety glass. We should have lap belts. Maybe we should have shoulder belts. And I think security has sort of gone through that same cycle lately over the last 5, 10 years, where
Mhm.
compared to even a few years ago, it's really come a long way. And
Yeah.
if you do it smartly, these are all very manageable risks.
Well, it's funny. If you talk about, so I agree. I think cybersecurity has gotten a lot better, particularly from the outside in a lot of
Mhm.
ways. The funny thing is the biggest risk is often the people inside with, clicking on a wrong email and there's that internal risk that is often, I think, under, they don't, they're not evaluating that as the same as, oh, we got to keep people out. Well, don't forget, we got to protect ourselves from the inside out too.
Yeah, they estimate 80 or 90% of people using external AI tools are actually violating company policy doing it.
Yeah,
Um,
I
so,
believe it.
Yeah.
for instance, like they can add a couple 100% of efficiency to the guys writing code, but you don't take your code and put it in. You have it write stuff and you take it out. And
Right.
little things like that can be lost on the average person in the trenches sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think AI, you mentioned at the beginning, AI is a whole conversation in and of itself and can be a great tool. On the other hand, that's an area that is still it's developing, and a lot of companies have not even sure what to do with it at this point. So it's a fun area to get into, but to your point, not understanding, and next thing you know, you're putting a lot of confidential, hey, I'm going to take this confidential design and put it into here and see what happens. So policies absolutely need to be, and education needs to be upgraded around that whole thought process.
Yeah, imagine a public company putting in, preliminary and non-material, non-public information in there to sort of format it better. And whoops.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. What I put the secret Coke recipe
I
for
was saying, Coach,
Coca-Cola
here comes
into
to mind.
AI. Whoops. Sorry about that.
even quarter. I mean, as a guy who used to have to sign off on quarterlies for a publicly traded company as an officer, I mean, it's still in my head of material non-public, and I think we're going to see some interesting incidental things come up here.
Right, right. I like I'm a visual guy. So I like the visual of, okay, you build the vehicle, think about that vehicle has gone through. Today, we don't say, oh, we have this problem. Let's, fix that. Like you said, onesie, twosie. What do? We say, hey, we want to create a vehicle that does X, Y, or Z, that solves these problems that exist and create that comprehensively alongside the technology, alongside the security, alongside, the effectiveness, which gets me to the next, topic of security and speed. Obviously, how in manufacturing, the flow, how everything runs from, getting raw materials in, going to finished goods, going throughout the warehouse, super important from a people, person, robotics, and so forth, but also, connectivity and using all of these tools, AI or otherwise, to security, speed, essential, because, again, you have network issues. Next thing you know, you've slowed the whole process and almost come to a screeching halt just because something as simple as a network issue.
Mhm.
So I would imagine that's just as essential, and kind of combined with these other materials, cybersecurity, robotics, and whatnot, is the security and the speed that then allows you to run most efficiently, allows those robotics to do what they're meant to do.
Well, it's the road everything runs on, right? Whether it was the Romans building roads and conquering the world, or the U.S.'s interstate highway system. Well, solid, secure connectivity that's ubiquitous and high capacity is really the modern road that enables everything to happen. To your point, and there's a lot of money going in. I mean, that's why I think you're going to see more of these private cellular networks, because they're much more secure than traditional Wi-Fi, whether it's Wi-Fi 6 or beyond. But the thing is, you're going to need a combination of everything. But John Deere announced a year ago they expect 80% of all manufacturing floor to be connected with private 5G. Yeah, they want the ability Because right now, you're running Ethernet cables if you want to connect it up, or you're running Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is just not as secure. You move a
Right.
forklift and it blocks the signal. Okay. I know of situations in big logistics areas where they were taking pallets down and driving halfway across a warehouse just so they could scan it and ship it. What does that do for your efficiency, right?
Right.
And or really harsh environments like things that are refrigerated or frozen, where they may have dozens upon dozens of Wi-Fi access points that either keep getting hit by forklifts, taken out by dust, or just malfunctioning because of dampness or something. And so having that ubiquitous, dependable, secure layer is really critical. Like we talked about inventory, one of the most exciting applications that sort of involves AI, modern networks, everything put together is really computer vision.
Right.
There's people you can work with now that instead of sending, you start out with sending the person with the clipboard, which now goes to a tablet, with an application. Well, they're getting so good now at just having a camera that just can glimpse and with the AI can tell you exactly what you have, the condition of
Right.
everything, how it changes over time. Um, but you need that network to enable all this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, as you think about that, I've been thinking you mentioned, OT and IT a little bit ago, and a lot of the companies that we work with are the SMBs, the small, and that's really where our market is the small, medium-sized businesses. And they don't necessarily have the CIOs who are driving innovation and technologies. And they may have a small IT team and things of that nature. So, this is where I think, and the other piece that we focus on, particularly in this podcast, is how do we improve the value of a business? And so, in my mind, this is not necessarily an IT driven function. This is a management, this is your operations people, your CEO, all thinking about how do we do things better? Where do we start? What's the low hanging fruit and what technologies exist to help improve this? I mean, that's kind of what I'm taking from this conversation. I mean, how do you kind of feel about that?
I love those kind of companies. They're probably some of the most fun, and the people really
Mhm.
understand the details of their business. Often family
Mhm.
businesses,
Mhm.
and it's really hard when it's that kind of business sometimes to sort of break out of the day-to-day grind to think a little
Mhm.
bigger. And I think though that those people know their operations so well, they can just sort of carve out a little awareness time to
Mhm.
talk to other people in the industry, go to conferences and events, and just see what's going on. They don't have to have a 100-person IT department to take advantage of this stuff because a lot of this is being productized at a very fast rate.
Mhm.
And because so much of this is software driven, you don't have to spend $500,000 to do an experiment. You can spend tens of thousands of dollars and do a very effective experiment quite often of bringing in different vendors, seeing what they've done, seeing how they can apply it. You can use the vendor ecosystem to get educated yourself and then
Mhm.
decide how you can experiment at the level you can afford. And to me, it's not even about the money most of the time, it's about the management cycles. Because when
Mhm.
you're a small to medium business, that's what kills you. It's the same thing I tell people who are looking to potentially sell their company. What kills you is the management cycles you have to give to the process, both in preparation and in
Mhm.
just in talking to potential acquirers. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing for this tech that you have to sort of do it in a way that doesn't suck the life out of you because your core business will suffer. And, and,
Right.
and I think the trick is carve out enough time to be aware of some of the things going on so you can then say, okay, let's try this thing. And do it at a level that's not going to kill you, but it's going to move the needle if you decide to do more of it.
Well, and I like that awareness, right? I mean, again, some of these things don't come back to super highly, complicated matters. It comes back to awareness. Okay, awareness of what my problems are, being in tune with that, where we're really not being as efficient, effective as we could be, and then awareness of what exists out there that may be a product or a potential solution to that, and how that may integrate into your business, right? Especially for those SMBs, right? So again, you're not aware. It goes back to what you say earlier. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it right, you're not aware, how are you going to fix something like that, right? So again, and that's going to by definition show that hey, we've got a process for this is and this is how we measure it and this is how we track it when it's on the rails, when it's off the rails, which then becomes explainable to a potential suitor or a buyer or something like that, that drives value. And like Mike said, we're big proponents of driving value. If we're not driving value, if it's not adding value to it, focus on the areas that are, right? And then where you're going to make that kind of, those
Yeah.
kind of leaps and bounds. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of like whether you're a big or small company, one of your research has shown that one of the most important decisions you make is resource allocation,
Mhm.
right? Of people, of money, of time, and this is all part of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And I think that, it's taking that time to step back and think strategically.
right.
And, yeah, and what's funny is, we talk to clients all the time, and they get inundated with, potential vendor. Hey, I can solve this problem. I can solve that problem. And maybe sometimes it's a good idea. Hey, why don't you tell me about that? To your point, learn something about what maybe it's something of interest. Maybe it's not, but you're learning a little bit more along the lines of what's out there.
Yeah, I know of one organization that had a whole guy or two dedicated just to sort of managing trucks coming in and out for transshipping, and having a heavy Internet of Things background, but just putting sensors on each bay where a truck can pull up. So instead of having a guy standing there or
Mhm.
constantly running back and forth, just automatic alerts of what things are open and what aren't are not, save them a
Mhm.
fortune and efficiency. You know,
Wow.
that's about the dumbest thing in the world. These are
Right.
these are sensors for less than $100 a piece.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. And okay, there's some software behind them. You can have somebody get a text, you can have it alert on the dashboard. It's the dumbest
Right.
thing in the world. But again, it's really not about the tech, it's about the process thinking.
Right.
And it's about thinking of, where are you burning cycles that just aren't adding a lot of value sometimes, and how do you become more efficient? And that will free up then the cycles to then focus on the higher value things that really require someone who understands deeply, your current manufacturing process and situation.
Right. Right. Well, I know we're getting close, to our time, but this is a lot to digest. I mean, if you're a listener on this, you've heard a lot. You may be saying, I've done some or none of that, or, hey, there's a lot of moving parts there, a lot of things I can go down. What would you suggest, Alan? Hey, I'm an SMB maybe, or maybe I'm a manufacturer who's adopted some of this. Maybe I've kind of, looked into it, but maybe not gone, full in. But there's a lot here to think about, a lot of things we could do. Where do you think you should start? Where should I begin in that thought process or thinking to be on my way to thinking more like the tech company, integrating these ideas when there's a lot here to talk about and think about?
So I would commit to this. I would commit to going to 2 conferences in the next year in your industry to learn more about what's going on. I would commit to doing 2 experiments in the next year based on what you learn. Just modest experiments to get started. And then the final thing would be read, read, read. We're in an environment where there's infinite information out there. The trouble is, how do you digest it efficiently?
Sure.
And this is actually where AI can help, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini. You can actually have it digest, oh, give me the summary of last month's blah blah blah, based on this criteria. You can use AI to cheat to get smarter in a hurry, and why not, right? We all only have so much time in the day. You have to be efficient about it, but you really have to just grow your awareness, because this stuff is moving so fast. The people that can absorb it a little bit faster are going to win a lot bigger.
Yeah.
I love that. Measurable, actionable goals right there from Alan as to what to do to start the process. I think that's great. And now, and I think and I think another thing that you mentioned that was great is, think of the process that you're trying to solve that's non-value add, as opposed to try to find some cool technology that may solve a problem that doesn't exist. Figure out what process, and sometimes there's some really simple tech solutions out there that can just be a game changer for you. That's a great point of view.
Well,
Like
it's like the old saying about both fire and debt. It's a great servant, but a poor master. The same thing applies to technology.
I like
That's a
that.
great point.
I like
That's a great. I like it too. Well, Alan, thank you for your time today. It's very valuable. This always goes by really really quickly, but I think you had some great points to consider, some great value to add to our manufacturing viewers. So I appreciate you being on today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me here, guys.
Thanks.
Yes, and to all our listeners and viewers, thank you as always. please reach out. Again, we've got some other podcasts out there on this one big, beautiful Bill Act and AI and other things that I think will be of interest. And all of this technology ties together, and there's some opportunities out there. So please feel free to look at those as well and reach out to us as always with questions or comments. Thank you all.
To learn more about James Moore & Company's manufacturing services, go to jmco.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our More on Manufacturing series to receive updates when new videos and podcasts are released. If you'd like to be a guest, or if there's a topic you'd like to see covered on a future episode, contact us on our website. You can also follow us on social media for more news as the landscape on manufacturing continues to rapidly evolve.